reaching God's people, created in His image of love.
Good morning. Welcome to Seek You, Lord. Today I want to talk about probably the most important thing I've ever talked about, and that's finding our divine self. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's probably one of the most difficult things you'll ever do in your life, but it's absolutely critical to do it to live a good life. And this is an awakening, and unlike an awakening like when you're asleep, you're asleep and then you wake up. It's not that kind of awakening. It's a spiritual awakening. And the way I'm going to describe it is probably different than most people that you find on YouTube explaining this. I'm giving you what I believe God led me to understand. And I think people get bits and pieces of this. They get knowledge of bits and pieces of this. And that's sort of how I was able to piece all this together, is going to different books and going to different Bible verses and seeking out God in prayer, and Him leading me to different people on the internet to listen to what they had to say, and then piecing it all together into one coherent thing, which I think God did for me. I'm not claiming that I did anything. All I did was ask God the question and seek Him out for the answer, and He kept pointing me to these different things and educating me as I went, which I deeply appreciate. So my awakening started the summer of 2025, around July timeframe, and me and my wife were returning from a trip we'd been on. And over the last 5 or so years, I felt like I had been dealing with a lot of past trauma in my life and dealing with issues and problems I had. And I thought, as far as the trauma goes, I had given people forgiveness of their part of it, and I'd forgiven myself and asked for forgiveness, from others in my part of it. And I thought I was pretty much healthy at that time. I felt like I had a good understanding of who I was, and I was ready to kind of take off from there, I guess, as a fresh start, so to speak. And we were driving back, of all places. We had gone to the Ark Encounter, which this hat has to do with the Ark Encounter up in Kentucky, and the Creation Museum. And I highly recommend both places to you if you really want to see some cool stuff. It's really fascinating. Probably ought to do a video on just that sometime, but it's well worth either a 3 or 4 day trip up there to go take all that in. Anyway, on the way back, driving back from there, I thought I'd dealt with all this built up anger type stuff inside myself and kind of resolved all that. But somebody got up right behind me on the interstate. We were about 5 hours into our drive, and I was really tired and kind of burned out, and this really frustrated me. And for some reason, over time, I've had issues with driving and people irritating me on the highway. I don't know why that's such a sticking point. It doesn't affect me on my motorcycle. Like when I ride my motorcycle, I don't seem to get irritated. But when I'm in a vehicle, in a car or truck or whatever, I do get angry when people get right up on my bumper or trying to pass when they shouldn't be trying to pass and all this kind of stuff. So this lady got right up on me. We're going 75 miles an hour. I felt like she was way too close. I started brake checking her. I started, she tried to go around me. I kind of act like I was going over. I was doing everything that you're told not to do, everything that you're, if a highway patrolman had been watching, I would have been pulled over for sure. She would have been pulled over probably too, because she was acting obnoxious. But we were both acting obnoxious, and this kind of built up, and finally she went on, and I started to calm down. But my wife was just irate, and she was ready to get out of the vehicle, wanted to get out of the vehicle for her own safety. And it, for the next 3 hours of driving, I just sat there and kind of asked myself the question, who is this person? Like, who did that right there? That did not feel like me. That felt like a different person. I'm not that person. I'm not an angry, violent person by nature, or at least I didn't think I was. So I kept asking, like, who did that? Like, who did that? Like, who took over my mind or took over my body and did that right there? What I witnessed, my wife witnessed, and I was just kind of taken back by it, and I just felt like that wasn't me. That couldn't be me. That's not the real me, and it really shocked me. It really shocked me, and that's what began my quest to awaken, even though I didn't call it that at that time. I just was looking for answers. After getting back, I did a lot of praying, a lot of Bible study, and a lot of time, a lot of meditation time with God, and just trying to understand, asking God, help me understand what is this? Like, what's going on here? Why do I act like this? Why did I think I had it figured out? I didn't have it figured out. So help me understand this. And I was really broken. I mean, I think with God, you have to get to that point. You have to get to a very broken state and get to where you're just completely at your end. You cannot figure this out. So you're turning it over to God completely and saying, God, if you can't figure this out or you can't give me the answers, I'm done. I'm good as lost. And so I turned it over to him, and he began to show me information, and he began to lead me to things. And the first thing he helped me go through was all my past trauma. I had a father who was a victim. I'll call it a victim of World War II, the trauma of World War II. He came back and was sort of, when the kids came along, and I was the fourth child of four kids, and when I came along, I think I was kind of an afterthought. He didn't really invest in me at all. He didn't really ever say, I love you. He didn't spend any time with me. He didn't ever pick me up and hug me. He never showed me any affection at all. So it's kind of like, I guess, emotional neglect is what you would say. And he was an alcoholic on top of that. And he would go into these narcissistic rages with my mother, telling her she can't cook food well, she doesn't know what she's doing, and why is she doing this, why is she doing that. And if you've ever been around an alcoholic, you know what I'm talking about. They kind of go into this prompting kind of mode where they want to force you into a fight kind of thing. And that's exactly how he was, very narcissistic when he was in that mindset. And he would challenge me, and my mother would usually escape and go back to her bedroom and play the role of a codependent, so to speak. And I didn't know what to do. I was just a young kid. Of course, you don't know what to do as a young kid when you see your parents going head to head, and none of this makes any sense. And plus, I was feeling the emotional lack, emotional neglect from him. And so none of it made any sense to me. So I just went to my room and closed down, sort of underneath the covers of my bed, and just kind of dealt with this internally, by myself. And that's never good to stuff, this kind of stuff deep down inside you, but that's what happened. And then later on, fortunately, I never developed any kind of drinking issue, but I did the issue fairly early on. And I think all these type addictions, they're sort of a outcry, alcoholism, being addicted to drugs, pornography, cutting yourself, all these kind of things. It's essentially an outcry for something that was lacking inside you when you were younger, and you're calling out for that. And you don't realize it when you're doing that. You just think, oh, I'm depressed, I'm upset, I'm frustrated. And you're not sure why that triggers that kind of reaction or that kind of thing, but it does. So, and then I would have anger outbursts. I'd be fine for a while, and then something. I was in the military as an officer in the military, so it was kind of dangerous, to be honest, because sometimes I would get angry at the people I was leading, and I'd want to throw them around and push them, and these anger outbursts. So it kind of fit in well, I guess, to a certain degree, because they want you to put on this self of toughness and machoism and a little bit of arrogance and command and authority and all that kind of stuff. So part of this ego self that started to develop worked pretty well in the military. And then I would be kind of a different person when I'd get home, I was around my wife. And then when we started to have my two boys, I would kind of soften and put on this kind of dad type self mask type thing, and be a little bit different around them. But also there, sometimes I would blow up and throw things and cuss and yell, and then I would, be fine after that. I would kind of go back to normal. But of course, that affected my wife, that affected my kids, and I'm so sorry about that. I'm so just feel horrible about it. But other than saying I'm sorry, and asking for forgiveness now, there's not a lot I can do about changing that. But so that's essentially, and that led up to where I was this past summer. Pretty much, it's been just a rocky kind of thing of good times, frustrated times, angry at God a lot, for not making things work out the way they should. Looking at life like, life owes me something. I've worked hard. I've done all the right things. I've saved money. I've worked hard. I've tried to, build a good reputation. I've tried to do all these things, but yet life keeps punishing me, kind of thing, and being angry about it. And I think this is very common kind of attitude now that I think back on it. I think most people, maybe even 90% of people, go through similar type stuff that I went through. So this isn't uncommon. It isn't weird or whatever. But sometimes we get into ourselves and we think, oh, I'm the only one. There must be something wrong with me. I'm the only one going through this kind of stuff, and I'm the only one frustrated with myself, and I'm the only one that seems to be in this dark place, that I can't escape. So that's where I was this summer. And that event I was talking about on the road, it kicked off something in my mind that something has to change. I have to figure this out. And the only person that can tell me the correct answers is God himself, Jesus. And so that's who I went to. And so I'm going to walk through this and just lay it out there, what I believe now. And then I'll kind of come back and explain why this is so important, and to take on this kind of belief, because otherwise you do have the wrong expectations of this life, and you do have kind of a confused view of everything. And I don't want that for my two sons. I don't want that for my nieces and nephews and that generation. I want them and their children, their children's children. I want them to escape, from this altered reality, which is what I would call what I've kind of lived out. And I think it's common. I think this is a very common way people think, is the way I was thinking. So this is not just something for a few. This is something, this awakening process, I think is ripe for everybody pretty much on the planet. And it's the most important thing that you can ever discover, I believe. So I've already talked about in another video, there's a human body is made up of three major components. Okay, the fleshly body, the dirt suit, as God called it. It's like an astronaut suit that we wear here on this planet. And it includes the brain, it includes the heart, and all the other major organs. And the brain is like the control tower. It tells the heart when to beat. It tells the digestive system when to operate, and it tells the kidneys when to work, and it tells the liver when to work, and it tells if you want to move forward, it tells your legs, how high up to lift your knee and how to place your foot and all that stuff. But it does it without us even thinking about it. Okay, so the brain is essentially the control tower of the body. It tells the body how to work, how to function, whether we're asleep, awake, or whatever, or we're even aware of what's going on in our body. The brain is operating 24/7, making sure the body does what it's supposed to do. So the body, obviously, when we die, we go to the grave and we're put in the grave and the body rots. Okay. And that is not the true us. That's not who we are. That's just a dirt suit that we wear here on this planet. Okay. There's two other components of the human, and that's the soul and the spirit, the little s spirit. The soul contains the consciousness and the mind, and the little s spirit is essentially a shell of what it was when Adam and Eve were here. When Adam was created, I believe God put into him, and he made the physical body, and then it says he blew into Adam life, and that was the spirit and the soul. And I also believe that God at that time blew in the Holy Spirit into Adam, so he received the Holy Spirit because Adam was perfect. He had never committed sin, and there's no reason for him to be separated from God. So that's how we connect to God, is our little s spirit houses the big s spirit, which is the Holy Spirit. So he had breathed in the soul, the little s spirit, and the Holy Spirit into Adam. And so everything was fine with Adam and Eve initially until they did sin. And remember, God said, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And they did die. The first death was the removal of the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit is not going to be in an unclean vessel that's sinful. So the first thing that happened was the Holy Spirit popped out of the little s spirit and left the little s spirit inside of us. And it's kind of like a shell that beckons for that big s spirit, the Holy Spirit. Our little s spirit beckons for that and wants that big s spirit back in us. But they lost that immediately upon sinning. So that was the first death that Adam and Eve experienced. And then 900 or so years later, they actually physically died, their body died, and they were obviously buried. But their soul and the little s spirit left their body, okay, and returned to God up to heaven, absent from the body, present with the Lord. All right, so that was the first man and woman. And then when we get, people after Adam and Eve, when we get created, obviously a man and woman come together, they have sex, there's a sperm that goes and fertilizes the egg, and then you have conception, and essentially the reproduction process kicks in, and the human body is formed in the womb. And obviously that comes from characteristics of the mother and the father, for sure. But I believe that our soul and spirit is not created at that point. I think our soul and spirit were created before and have lived with God before this time. Okay. And just like he did for Adam and Eve, he breathed in the soul and spirit. It doesn't say he created the soul and spirit. It doesn't say he made the soul and spirit. It says he breathed it in. And there's other verses we can point to. All right, so if we go and we do a quick review of Genesis 1:26-35, God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. That's the triune God saying, let's make mankind in our image and our likeness. And what he's saying there is we're like a manifestation of the great I am. He's the I am, and we're like a manifestation of the great I am here on earth. We're a representation of him here on earth. So God created humankind in his image, male and female. He told us to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. He told us to rule over everything except our fellow man. That's the only thing he didn't say to have dominion over, is our fellow man. And that's one of the root causes of many problems here on earth is we've tried to have dominion over our fellow man. And he never told us to do that. That's his territory to have dominion over man. Then God saw what he had made and he said it was very good. It was perfect. He was pleased with it. There was nothing to be added to it. Then Genesis 2:7, then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the earth, that's the body, and he blew the breath of life into his nostrils. The man became a living being. So there was no life in the man when the body was formed. The life came in when he breathed into the man's nostrils, and then that became a living being. So the life does not come from the body. It comes from what the Lord blew in. And we know in other places in the Bible, it talks about the three parts of a human being the body, the soul, and the spirit, the little s spirit. So those are the three parts. So the only two parts that weren't present after making the body out of the dust was the soul and the spirit. The Hebrew word for spirit is roch, which means wind, breath, air, spirit. Okay, Psalm 139 says, God knitted us together in our mother's womb. So he put us together. And if you ask me what he was knitting together, not only was he making the body and forming the body, but he was also unifying the soul, the spirit to the body. Okay. And Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. This is a very, very, very important verse. Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Now, if you look up the Greek on this verse, that I knew you part is a very intimate knowing. It's not, hey, I had a premonition about you way over there. I saw you standing over there or something. No, it's, I intimately knew you. I knew you. And when did he know us? Before he formed us in the womb. Okay, let's look at Ephesians 1:4. Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blemish before him in love. Okay, he's talking about God. So even as God chose us in himself before the foundation of the world. So before earth, the universe, and all that was created, he chose us so that we should be holy and without blemish before him in love. How do you choose somebody, and how do you have an intimate knowledge of somebody without that being something? Okay. Me being something, you being something, that person over there being something. How do you have an intimate relationship before the foundation of the world? How do you do that without that being manifested? That spirit and that soul being manifested. So this is where a lot of, Christians are going to kind of jump up and scream bloody murder. And I accepted Christ at the age of 13, and I understand where they're coming from because they open up the Bible and they're taught by pastors that go to seminary school, and seminary school says these are topics that you can't talk about. These are topics that you can talk about. Don't ever, I think one of the things they teach them is never go along with a near-death experience, an NDE, never go along with it, even though they're mentioning Jesus and all that, because we just don't believe that. And be careful when people say they saw angels, be careful with that. And anything that's outside the boundaries of the Bible, I think people are highly frustrated with. And even the hints, the small hints inside the Bible, most pastors will stay away from those. Like I just reading those verses that he basically knew us. He had some knowledge of us, and it was an intimate knowledge before the foundation of the world. Okay. So no pastor is ever going to want to talk about that. That's like one of those red topics that could cause a lot of problems. And so you're never going to hear this in church. But from listening to many near-death experiences that are proven to be real because the person died. They were medically dead, and they saw things and heard things that you cannot hear and see when you're medically dead, like fire truck numbers and the roofs of hospitals, being able to describe that in detail, being able to describe conversations several rooms down the road or several rooms over, being able to talk about what their family was doing at the time of their death, all these kind of things. You can't disprove that because they're able to repeat that back. So these are real near-death experiences where people were clinically dead, but they saw things and heard things that's basically impossible as a human being. These people, many of them, I'm not going to say every story, but many people, when they go to heaven and they see Jesus or they see the angels or they see relatives, they say, this feels like home. Like I'm finally back. I'm finally back where I was. So it's not a feeling like, wow, this is brand new to me. It's a feeling like I'm coming back home. I've been here before. And many of these NDEs express that we chose to come here. Okay, we had, as a soul in the universe, we had a choice about coming here. And, we worked with God's angels, his guides, to plan out how we were going to come here and what we were going to experience when we came here. All right, down to things like that we can't even possibly imagine, but things like being raped or having cancer or having a emotional, neglectful father or having a leg or limb blown off in a war or losing their parents at a very early age or ending up in the orphanage, or there's all sorts of things. We actually were co-authors to that plan before we came here. Now you're saying to yourself, I know what you're saying. You're saying, why would I ever agree to come here and have cancer? Or why would I ever agree to come here and have a limb blown off? Or why would I ever agree to come here and lose a child after 2 years? How could anybody in their right mind choose that? Well, we have to understand that time in heaven, like you take 85 years here on earth, that's going to feel like maybe 15 or 20 minutes in heaven. Okay, that's the first thing you have to understand. So we're fully energized in heaven. We have no bounds of this body. The feeling we have in this body, we feel kind of weighted down and bound in this body. We don't have that in heaven. We feel energized, excited, like we can do anything, conquer anything, be anything. And our whole existence revolves around other souls, being connected to other souls, and the need for connection to other souls, and our need for connection to the source. The source is the great creator, God himself. So we need that connection to the source and other souls, and we see the importance of other souls, and we see the need to grow our soul, okay? We see the need to improve our soul. So let's just say I'm up in heaven and I'm really good at love. I'm really good at kindness. I'm really good at a lot of things. But one thing that I'm really my soul is sort of challenged at is, let's just say, it's mercy. I've never been very merciful. I've never, been very compassionate towards people, compassion and mercy. So I meet other souls that are very compassionate and are very merciful. And I'm like, wow, I want to get that. Like, how did you get there? Like, how did you grow your soul to get so much mercy and compassion? I want that for myself. I want to be more and more like the source. And, they might say, well, I went to earth. I actually had a life on earth, and I had to learn the hard way, so to speak, mercy and compassion. Now you'd say, well, why don't, if that's the case, why don't souls up in heaven, why don't they just go to like a library and read books and watch videos and all that? Well, as well as I do, if you go to the library and read about climbing Mount Everest and all the hell you go through to climb a huge mountain like that, and all the pain and suffering and heartache and physical, exertion and excitement and all that, you can't read that in a book. So it's the same for the souls up there. They need some type of contrast environment where they can go and they're faced with difficulties and they're faced with challenges in order to grow these fruits of the Spirit and attributes of God to be more like God. That's the whole goal up there, is to be more and more and more like God. So we basically work with a guide. We plan out our life, and we say, okay, they say we're going to be born into these type of parents. You're going to face these kind of issues. And ultimately, these are going to help you work on mercy and compassion. I'm just saying, making that up, if that's what we're working on. And we go, okay, I agree to that. And so the relative experience of life, the big events, I guess you'd say, we agree to, and that's mapped out for us when we come here. We may not know the exact timing. We may, relatively know midway through our life, this is going to happen. 3/4 of the way through our life, this might happen, that kind of stuff. But we don't know the exact timing. We don't know how it's all going to happen exactly, but we know there's going to be these challenges that we've agreed to. So I wanted to clarify a couple of quick points about coming here of our own free will, voluntarily, our soul and spirit coming here to the earth for this experience. So free will. God tries everything in his power to never violate our free will. We see that throughout the Bible. And if we were simply born like a biological accident here on this earth, and then we never found God and proclaimed God, and we never produced any godly fruit here on earth, then we could always go back to the other side, to the spirit realm, and we could say, God, you violated my free will by sending me here to earth. So that's part of why this is a actual voluntary type experience that our soul and spirit signs up for. The other point I want to make is coming here to earth is a really, really big deal. It's not taken lightly by God, the angels, or other souls. It's a very honoring type decision to come here, held with great esteem by all the heavenly beings that we'd actually want to come here, because they all understand the risks involved. They understand the difficulties of this planet and having this earth body and being disconnected from God, and the risk involved of not connecting back to God and all those things. On the other side, they totally understand that, and they know, it is a big deal to come here. So I want people to understand that. The other thing I want people to understand is, we see people with different types of lives here on earth. Some sort of have it made. There's no big issues in their life, and they just kind of go through life just with no care whatsoever, and everything's perfect. And then other people we see, they have medical issues, they're molested, they're raped, they're kicked out of their home, they're homeless, they live on the streets for years, they, maybe get involved in drugs and have to go through drug recovery. They maybe have to raise children in a very poor environment. They may never have the money they need. They may lose parents at a very early age. There's all, medical issues, cancer, losing limbs, having, severe trauma in their life, all kinds of things that, we see some people go through, and it doesn't make any sense. But on the other side, when we choose a life that's very difficult with all these complications in it, what the opportunity is the further glorification of God, way beyond what would be possible if we just had a very normal life. Also, the improvement of our soul in the same way. So that's why some people here on this earth are going through these super difficult situations and super difficult lives, and we don't understand it, and we think, well, how could they, go through so much? Like, how could they do it? If they find God and they exhibit God's fruit or God's characteristics through that, love, joy, peace, hope, mercy, compassion, while they're going through these things, that's very honoring to God. That's the most honoring thing that we can do for God and for our soul, the improvement of our soul. So understand that, if you feel like, how did I get this life? Like, why was I picked to have this or that, or go through all these bad things? Well, you agreed to it, but you agreed to it with the notion in your mind that you're going to further glorify God by having those more difficult experiences. It's like, levels of difficulty. And behind each of those levels of difficulty is the gain of honor and respect for the Lord, and glorification for Him, as well as improving your own soul. So that's kind of why we get into picking these more difficult journeys sometimes. And it's also the reason we may come into this life with a more normalized life, because we don't want to risk all those challenges and things. We want a little bit more simplified life. So we keep things a little bit more clean and tidy, because we're not sure if we can handle all that difficulty. So that's how you see people with different types of lives, and how that differs between those two. I hope that helps. So God and these guides take us, they take our soul, they take our spirit. And when it's time, when that baby starts to be formed up in the mother's womb, they blow that soul and spirit into that baby. Okay. Now, what comes with that, the risk that comes with this whole thing, is we are veiled off. Our mind is veiled off from God. The best way I've heard it described by somebody is if you have a loudspeaker, and it's making a hum, because it's got a lot of power being sent to it, and it's making a hum. If you just take, you take your volume or your mixer slider and you just, you turn that as low as you can get it. That's essentially what happens to our memory when we come here and we enter the baby's body as soul and spirit. We have no memory of God, although we may have feelings we still probably have feelings of connectedness to God and things like that, but we just don't understand it because we don't have memory of it. This is one of the reasons why small children, they may see ghosts, they may see spirits, they may see actually Jesus talking to them. Okay, and we should never say, "Oh, you didn't see that. Oh, that's not true. You made that up." We should never do that. Like small children, between the ages of, well, really all the way up through their teen years, really possibility, but especially age 1 through 8. I mean, there's a high possibility that they are very strongly connected to the spirit realm and are seeing things and having Jesus talk to them, and their spirit guides talk to them, and angels talk to them. So don't ever deny a child and say, "You didn't hear that, you didn't see that, that's all made up." Okay. But anyway, getting on. So we come in to the body, we're veiled off of knowledge of our experience in heaven. We start to grow up. Now, this is where we start to get into the discussion about awakening. There is, when the inner us, okay, the inner divine self that's put into that baby is 100% pure. It's 100% sin free. It's 100% made by God's hands, and it has no evil in it. It has no darkness in it, and it's 100% pure. That's where, when you hear people talk about pure consciousness, that's what they're talking about, the pure consciousness of us. It's without thinking. It's without doing. If you think about sin requires two things, usually, thinking and doing. Sometimes it's just thinking. We can sin just thinking. But it at least requires thinking, and it often requires doing to actually commit a sin. But the being, just being us, just being the true divine self that's inside that baby, the soul, the consciousness inside that baby, when that baby comes out, that true divine consciousness is us. That's who we are. If you're, trying to find out who we are, that's the essence of who we are. Now, you think about babies. Why do we love babies? Why do we love to hold babies? Why do we love to be around babies, smell babies, touch babies? It's because that is the representation of the pure us, okay, at birth. That baby is 100% pure, okay? Now, what begins to happen? So the baby starts growing, they start to crawl, they start to walk, and all these things. And they have adults in their life, and they have other kids in their life, and they have friends of family members and things, and people interacting. They go to the grocery store and they see things, and they go on trips and they see things, and they go to the playground and they see things. And this is where this sort of ego self starts to grow. I'm not going to go in super detail about this, but it's kind of this thing that says, they start thinking and they start realizing, they start watching, let's say, another kid. Maybe they watch a spoiled child at the playground and they realize that spoiled child gets pretty much everything he wants. All he's got to do is scream and yell at his mother and scream bloody murder and beg her for candy, and out pops some candy, and then gets candy and gets to do whatever he wants to do. So that's where, we start to go, oh, okay, I'm going to try that. And so that's where sin starts to develop. But sin requires thinking and it requires doing. And that's ego self. And I'm not going to go deep in the ego self today, but remember, I was talking about my story, and I was talking about the fact that I took on this persona. When I went in the military, I took on a certain persona of being tough and being loud and being in charge and being having a commanding voice and always having the answer really quick and being able to respond really quick and take action really quick. And the reason I took that on is because everybody around me that was in the military pretty much was saying without saying, okay, saying through their actions that this is the type of person that's going to be successful in the military. Okay. So then I take on that persona, even though that's not the real me. That's not really the characteristics of the real me, but I take on that persona because I have to survive as a second lieutenant in the military. So I take that on. We do the same thing as small children. And when we're trying to deal with trauma in our life, like when I was dealing with my father's absence and neglect of emotions and things like that, and my mother's inability to help me out when I needed help through all that, and no one talking to me, I had to take on a persona at that time to protect myself. And it sort of, I don't know exactly what persona it was exactly. It's hard for me to remember back then, but it was probably a more hardened version of myself of, I'm not going to get too emotional. I'm not going to get too involved in this person or that person because I might put myself at risk of being hurt. I want to stay away from my father as much as I can. I want to avoid him, just do things that pleases him, but doesn't set him off, so we put on this persona that works, that protects us and keeps us okay as children. And that gets us through the other side, or at least we perceive that's going to help us survive the situation we're in. Okay. And then through our life, we keep putting on these personas. All right. And maybe, if you're, let's say you're a young girl and you're very pretty and very attractive, and you realize, hey, I get a lot of attention through my looks. I get a lot of notice. Some of it's envy from other girls who look at me, but some of it's like, praise and adulation, I guess you'd say, from other people who see me that think I'm beautiful, so we start to use that to sort of get an edge on people. So that kind of becomes who we are. If somebody said, who are you? And we'd say, well, I'm, this beautiful teenage girl or whatever. Maybe you're a guy that's very athletic and, great at sports and very tough and very hard nosed. And you realize, man, people know me throughout my town and I don't know these people, but they know me through my sports and through playing sports and stuff. So you take on this persona of, yeah, I'm the tough athlete, and I'm going to go places because of my athletics, and things are happening for me because of athletics. So you take on this persona that tends to elevate you and make you be seen. Okay. And you start to identify with that. Unfortunately, and there's lots of other examples. I could keep going, but you could be rich, have lots of money, and that kind of dominates your persona. You could be, a very religious person and, you're doing all these religious activities and all these things for the church, and that kind of becomes your persona. and everybody knows you through that. But the real you, when you're by yourself, you're like, man, there's something missing here, and I think that's true for all those different personas I was talking about. So the real you is still that divine conscious self that's inside you. That's the real you. And remember when God created Adam, and after he got done creating Adam, he looked at his work and he said, "It is very good." It basically, he was saying it's excellent. It can't be added to, it can't be improved. That's that inner conscious, that inner divine self is the you that God looks at as the real you and the perfected you, and the one that he would look at as his child. All this ego the ego masks that we wear in life and all this other stuff that we get confused about in our head, that's who we are. Okay, we start believing that we're this, super cool athlete guy, we're this super social media guy, we're this super good looking female, we're this, super smart brainiac, we're this, whatever ego we take on, what ego mask we take on, we start believing that we're that person. And when we're asked about ourselves, we say that's who we are. That ego self is who we start describing, that ego self, not the true divine self that we really are. And since we're masked from God, we're masked from knowledge of God. When we get here, we don't really connect all the dots. And, some people believe that we're just, a biological accident. Your mother and father were up in the hayloft and then they had sex, and then 9 months later out you popped, total accident, total chance and circumstance, no plan to it. No. And the problem you get into with that kind of life and that kind of belief is you look at your life like an accident, like a evolving car wreck kind of thing. And you're always looking at life like, why isn't life giving me back anything? And I've worked hard and I've saved money and I've got a good job and I got a nice house and I got the right vehicles and I'm on social media and I'm doing all the things that the world says to do, but I'm not satisfied. Why am I not satisfied? And that's part of the problem of not having a clear self-identity. Defining ourselves as that true, inner, deep, conscious level of just being and being aware and being present of mind, being still, being quiet, no thinking, no actions, just being present and being able to observe things around us, and being satisfied. This is what God created. This is the perfection that God created, the true me, without any additives, without any of these ego layers on top of me. This is the true divine self that I can be satisfied with. And it's so important when we have an awakening. Essentially what we're doing is the beginning of the awakening is to start to see a glimmer of that divine consciousness inside of us. That's when, you remember I was talking about my event, where I was, jockeying on the highway with this woman. And afterwards, I began to ask myself and say to myself, this is not me. This is not the true me. See, I was starting to have a glimmer of that true divine self deep inside there. But I wasn't sure, I was like, well, I can't connect the dots because I'm operating as this ego self, but, the true divine self is in there. But how do I get these two things connected so they're one thing, because it's not making sense to me. So an awakening is essentially finding the true divine self and being completely quiet and just being present, not in the past, not in the future, because those two things are not really real. The only thing that's real is this moment right now. That's the only thing that you can affect. If you think about the future, I can't affect the future. That's like a thought about what things should be. The only impact I can have is what's right now. So if you want to find your true divine self, your true divine consciousness, you got to be quiet. You got to still yourself and stop thinking and stop doing and just be present. and just be aware. A great place to do this is out in nature. Just look at a tree, admire it. Just look at a lake or a river or a creek. Listen to the water and just admire the beauty of it. Or maybe wildlife, maybe animals, out in the forest. Just be completely still and completely satisfied. That is the true you. That is the true essence of who you are. All these layers that we put on in life, that's all illusions, okay? If you think about it, our mind created those people, those personalities, and it's not real. It's not the real us. And that's why we're frustrated. See, we're frustrated because we can't find the real us. And we keep looking for all these things: wealth, exercise, cars, houses, moving to this city, taking on a new hobby, this, that, and other thing. We keep looking at all these things to make us happy. Even religion, getting involved in church. If I just get involved more in church, and what does the pastor do? The pastor tries to encourage that, right? They say, if you just get involved in church and you pray more, everything's going to be fine. It's like, no, it's not, because if you don't ever find the true divine self, you're not going to be satisfied. Okay, that's where satisfaction comes from, is knowing the true divine self and starting to have the realization that all these ego self layers that you put on during your life, that's all illusions. Okay, it's not real. It's not the real you. So there's a whole nother topic about, how do we bring this divine conscious self into our daily life, into the thinking and the doing life that we all have to operate on this earth, right? And what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to improve our soul. That's why we're here. And see, that's another lie that we tell ourselves is, if I get involved in the right thing, or if I get enough money, or if I do this or accomplish that, or I get with this group, or if I badmouth that group and I write this book and I do this and I get on YouTube and I do all these things, I'm going to eventually be satisfied, and I'm not going to feel anxious, and the world will start treating me right. If I can just get there, I just got to get there. That's a lie, because this world was never created for you to get there. This world was created as contrast by God to challenge your soul and challenge your mind to improve. Okay. So the first big challenge that we have as a soul here on this earth is to find God. Okay. He is the source of life. He is the intelligence, the great intelligence, the great creator, whatever you want to call it: source, intelligent being, creator, God. We need to find him again, because remember, we came in veiled of that information. Because without him, when we cross over to the spirit side, we're going to be in shock. If we don't find him here on earth, we're going to be in shock, because we're going to suddenly realize he's there. Okay. He's there, and he's interconnected to all souls, and all souls are interconnected to each other, and we all need each other. Okay. One of the things that, shocks us in the Bible is where Jesus just casually says, love your enemy, forgive your enemy, and pray for your enemy. Okay. Love your enemy, pray for your enemy, forgive your enemy. And we're just like, that makes no sense. Like, that totally makes no sense. Well, that's the ego self talking, because the ego self always wants an enemy, always is frustrated, is always angry, is always upset about something, and always striving for something. If I just strive for this, or I just strive for that, and I get that, I'll have it. And what happens when we strive for all this stuff in the world? What happens? We get it. We're happy for about, a day, two, maybe a week, maybe a month, and then we're frustrated again, because there's nothing in this world that's supposed to satisfy us. Okay. God didn't put anything in this world to bring us satisfaction. He put us in this world to, number one, rediscover the source. That we were with the source since the beginning of time. We're going to be with the source till the end of time. Okay. This earth time is a little bit of time to test us. It's like a test bed, a laboratory, if you will, to grow our soul. And what does he want to grow our soul into? More like him. All the characteristics of God: love, peace, joy, kindness, forgiveness, mercy, compassion, forbearance. I don't know what I'm leaving out, but there's probably 5 or 6 other ones you could probably throw in there. But you kind of get my drift, that he's trying to grow our soul to be more like him. So when we come to our death, and when we go to the grave, and we don't actually go to the grave, we don't actually experience death. We pop out of our body before we experience death, and the soul and the spirit go back to heaven, back to truth, which we will all understand. We're back with the source. We're back with all other souls. There's infinite knowledge, infinite information. There's no, on the other side, God does not hide anything from us. There's no question that you can ask that he's going to hide the answer from you. It's complete truth, complete honesty. Communication's done through telepathically. We don't have to actually talk. We can just think it. These bodies, although it may help us and we can see a form of a body on the other side, or we might just see an orb, energy orb on the other side that represents us. But we're going to know that's Aunt Bessie, that's Uncle Joe, that's Grandpa Fred, all these people that we've had interaction with, and maybe some people we hadn't had the interaction with, but all of our relatives, our past relatives, everybody in our family, all of our friends, everybody we see, we're going to know. Okay. And we don't need somebody to tell us. It just pops in our mind that we know that person, even if it's a great grandfather or grandmother that we never even saw. On the spirit side, on the other side, we're going to know those people. So that's the goal, and that's why we come here. We come here to grow our soul. And the 2 big challenges, again, find the source, reconnect to the source while we're here on earth. Okay. Understand God is the creator of everything. He's the source of everything, and we need him. Okay. We need him and his interconnective nature of all other souls. We need him desperately. Secondly, to find our true divine self. Okay. Because otherwise we live this whole life sort of, again, under a veil of deception, like we don't understand who we really are, and we don't do what we came here to do. If I come here to gain mercy and compassion, I used that example earlier. Maybe you came here to work on forgiveness. Maybe another person came here to work on love of the neighbor, or maybe another person came here to work on kindness. I don't know, joy, or having joy or something. If we don't find our true divine self, we're never going to work on those things. Okay. We're never going to truly work on those things the way we should. We're going to be living this sort of false understanding of who we are. And we're going to stay stuck in this competitive world of capitalism, of, this is mine, and I'm ready to fight you, and, let's go to war, and let's kill people, and let's, all this crazy stuff. This is all crazy stuff going on, okay? And it's all driven by each person living in an illusion of who they really are, the true divine self. They don't know the true divine self, so they live these ego personalities. And ego always wants an enemy. Ego always wants to fight. Ego always wants to complain. Ego is frustrated 50% of the time, okay? And that's why we have wars. That's why we drive by people starving to death and we don't lift a hand, even though we're the big church leader in our church and we're speaking every Sunday and we're going on all these mission trips, but yet we drive by, 3 homeless people are starving to death on the street every single day and we don't give a flip, okay? All that stuff is nonsense, okay? All our life, our performance, it's like a stage performance when you're in the ego life. You're living out the ego self. You're like on a stage, but you don't understand that you're an actor. You think the stage is real, okay? The stage is a stage, and it's an act, okay? And there's curtain one, curtain two, curtain three, curtain four, all the way up until your death. Okay. When you get in conscious self, you pull yourself back into a third person observer, and you can actually look at your life and you can actually say, wait a minute, this is all foolishness. It is all foolishness. The only thing that isn't foolishness is your connection to the source and your love for the source and your need for the source and your connection to conscious self, divine self, and the need to perfect those attributes of the source. Okay. That's why you're here. That's your purpose. Those two critical things right there are what you're here to do and why you're here. Okay. Now you may do great things. You may write a book that sells, 50 million copies and you become a multimillionaire. Okay. Wonderful. You may do like Mother Teresa and go to Calcutta and create a place, a refuge for, people that are sick and dying and feed people. And that's awesome. Okay. Because Mother Teresa actually gave in to her divine self and basically lived out her divine self. That's what we should be doing. Okay. But all this, material wealth, striving, competing, fighting each other, bad mouthing a certain group, labeling a certain group, all this labeling and bad mouthing and bickering and fighting and feeling like I hate my brother, I hate my sister, I'm jealous, all these crazy things going on in our head every day. We need to understand that's driven by thinking and doing out of the ego self. Okay. That's where that comes from. It comes from the ego self. It doesn't come from that divine, pure self, who we really are. And that's where we feel this conflict. Okay. We feel this conflict. But that is the crux of what I want to tell you. I hope you find your true divine self, your inner conscious self. There's outstanding information out there. If you want to get into older teacher on ego, Carl Jung, Jung, Carl Jung, Jung. He was a great teacher of this ego self and what that's all about. And then I'd quickly follow that up with Eckhart Tolle, Eckhart, Eckhart Tolle, Tolle. And his teachings are all about finding this inner conscience and understanding that separate from the ego. And there's a lot of material he puts out, and it takes a long time to sort of wrap your head around that. And I'm still at the process of wrapping my head around that and really finding my true divine self and how that true divine self comes out in the day-to-day world, because we still have to pay the bills. We still have to, go to the grocery store, buy groceries. We still have to do all these things. So how do we live as conscious self, true divine self, wipe out this illusion of the ego, but still perform in this world, which is filled with probably 95% of people that are not awakened yet, that are still sleepwalkers, as I call them, sleepwalkers. And how do we deal with that? How do we operate? That's where I'm kind of at right now with my journey, is how to operate in the real world of chaos and confusion as my divine self, and not get sucked back in, because the ego self versions of us wants to suck us back into that. They don't want it to relinquish control of who we are. They want to hold on to that, and they want us to be in conflict and be striving and be, in competition and be trying to, do all these things that, the world says will make you happy, which are all false illusions, of course. They give temporary happiness, but they certainly don't give permanent happiness. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I hope you find this helpful. My whole point of putting this together is to help the next generation, the younger generation, so that you're not going through the same thing I went through, where you're kind of lost. You're not awakened for 60 years, and then finally you do awaken. Hopefully you can, find peace in all this, and understand it's real critical we understand this life is a test, and yes, we experience hardship and frustrations and stuff, but instead of looking at, this is horrible and this is good and this is disastrous and this is okay, and instead of looking at life like that, we should probably try to start looking at life as just opportunities. Okay. Just opportunities, a medical issue, a heart defect. That could be just opportunity for you to be more patient, more understanding of other people that have that, or whatever area you're trying to improve your soul in. That's just a vehicle. That health issue is just a vehicle to create a contrast, so that you can make choices, you can make decisions, because we can either choose to grumble and gripe through these kind of things and complain and cry and be frustrated all the time, or we can say, what is it I need to learn from this? What can I gain from how can I advance my soul right now? Maybe I can go over here and lift up these people. I have this similar issue that I got. I can go lift them up, or maybe I can go take this course, in finance, and that's going to help me better understand how to manage money, and then I can take that in and help other people do that better. So there's just tons of opportunities out there that present themselves in this life, and that's the way to look at life, is more of opportunities to express the soul in a loving, kind, joyful, merciful, forgiving way each and every time. That's and not let ego self take back over. How do we keep ego self, squashed down or completely evaporated? That would be the ultimate end goal, is completely evaporate ego self, because we don't really need ego self. We just have always lived with ego self so long. Now we're not sure how to even proceed because we don't have ego self. So that's what makes getting rid of ego self hard. But, how do we do that? How do we grow our soul and be more like the source? Because when we cross over, the only thing that's going to mean anything is how we grow our soul to be more like the source. It's not going to be our bank account. Our bank account won't be judged. Nobody's going to care about our bank account. Nobody's going to care about how many mission trips you went on. Nobody's going to care about how many hours you spent, working in the worship band. Nobody's going to care about how many books you sold. Nobody's going to care about your PhD in philosophy. Nobody's going to care about, whether you opened up a clinic in a foreign land. The only thing God is going to care about is, did your soul grow? Okay. Did you get more loving? Did you get more kind? Did you get more generous? Did you get more compassionate? Did you get more merciful? And if you start reading the New Testament, you're going to see how all the things in the gospel that Jesus talked about, they completely align to what I'm talking about. He never called us to get religious. He never called us to, I don't know, just all these things in the world. He never got involved in it. He never got involved in politics. He never got involved in all this foolish stuff, because that's not the purpose of this life. The purpose of this life is to love, is to be generous, is to be at peace, is to be joyful, is to be generous, is to be kind, is to be fully forgiving, even to the point of praying and forgiving and loving our enemies. Even when they're killing us, they're stoning us to death, or they're stabbing us with a spear, we're still asking God to forgive that soul. That soul is lost, underneath all this ego stuff. And that's another soul that we all need to be in concert with all other souls, interconnected with the source. That's why Jesus was able to say the things he said in the New Testament, that we find mind-boggling. The reason we find mind-boggling, because we're living sort of like this blurred illusion, of ego self, and it doesn't fit into ego self at all. And that's why we got to find divine self, true consciousness, reconnect with the source, and then start growing our soul to be more like the source, which is the purpose for this life. Thank you guys. Have a blessed day and a blessed week.